Our job is to try and help everybody to be part of fixing factory farming and ending this incredibly cruel and destructive practice. One of the biggest issues in the fight against factory farming, the fight to give the animals that we raise for food a better life, is simply funding. A really simple, really quick, easy thing you can do is to donate to some of the best charities out there using your money most wisely. And this can actually have even more impact than kind of going completely vegan. For the average omnivore in the West, that $23 a month is enough to kind of completely zero out your impact on animals. Most people have this intuition that human lives matter a lot more than animal lives, but they also think logically that there's no good reason to care a lot more about a dog than about a pig. 97% of the donations that currently go towards animals go to dogs and cats and animals living in shelters. The difference between a dog and a pig is that one of them lives in your house and you know them, you gave them a name, and the other one lives on a factory farm. All the donations that people make via our platform, we don't keep any of that money at all.
Hi, my name is Ronan Kennedy and this is the Ronan Kennedy podcast. On this show, I'm going to be talking to professionals from various different careers, industries and backgrounds to learn about what they do, how they do it and how they got into it. So today I'm joined with Tom Norman. Tom, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me today. Really appreciate it. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do, please?
Yeah, sure. My name's Tom. I'm the co-founder of an organization called FarmKind. Our job is to try and help everybody to be part of fixing factory farming and ending this incredibly cruel and destructive practice. And we do that by finding some of the best charities that are out there working on this issue at the moment, bringing them to people's attention and showing people just how much impact they can have by donating to those charities and kind of getting involved in their work and supporting them.
That's fantastic. And can I ask, how did you get into it?
Yeah, so I think I've had quite a sort of unusual journey to this space. I went to university. I studied composing classical music. So
Okay, very
completely
cool.
useless, very different. And then I had a sort of a career. I ended up as a lawyer. I worked for the UK government as a lawyer for a while. And then I came across this program called Ambitious Impact. At the time, it's called Charity Entrepreneurship. This is this idea that there are a lot of like things in the world that could be potentially really impactful and make a really big difference to either humans or to animals. But there's nobody working on these things. There's potentially really exciting sort of projects that just aren't being worked on. So the idea of this organization is to find people who are interested in being entrepreneurial and starting new organizations, and marry them up with this idea and have them go off and try and see if this is really exciting, if we can make this work. So I joined this program. Through that, I found my co-founder, and we started FarmKind because one of the biggest issues in the kind of the farm animal space, so that the fight against factory farming, the fight to give the animals that we raise for food a better life, is simply funding. So we know some really good ways actually to make the lives of these animals better, whether that's corporate campaigns that kind of make companies give up some of the cruelest practices and force them to treat their animals better, or whether that's kind of technologies developing the new food system that can overtake the current kind of broken model that we have now.
Yeah.
And a lot of amazing work's being done in this space, but it's massively funding constrained. So there's nowhere near enough funding. To give kind of a really stark picture, the meat industry is worth about $2.3 trillion. The whole funding for the farm animal movement per year for the globe overall is about $290 to $220 million.
So it's nothing in comparison.
1,000 times smaller. Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely crazy. This is, I looked up, it's roughly about what McDonald's makes in gross profits in a week.
Wow.
And that's for the entire year. So it's a tiny amount of money that it's still being amazing work being done with that money, but it's just not enough simply to tackle this really quite big problem. So our job is to try to encourage more people to kind of get involved and to donate to some of the best charities that are using their money best to do the most good, and see if we can kind of level the playing field a little bit.
I love it. So you're advocating for the cause, but you're encouraging people to donate. Is that right? So it's those two kind of pillars.
Yeah, that's right. So we think that one of the things that kind of I think it can be an initial sort of stumbling block for a lot of people in this issue is that they think, because they're often told this by kind of animal activists and people like this, that if they think factory farming is bad, if they agree that this is a problem for environmental reasons, animal welfare reasons, whatever it might be, that like the thing you've got to do is stop eating animals, like go vegan, go or whatever, maybe you reduce or something like this. And we just know that there's a lot of people out there who really aren't ready to do that for all kinds of reasons. Um, and our big kind of mission, the thing we want to say is like, actually, this is not the only thing you can do. You can actually have an even bigger impact with relatively small amounts of donations. And so if you care about this issue, a really simple, really quick, easy thing you can do is to donate to some of the best charities out there using your money most wisely. And this can actually have even more impact than kind of going completely vegan might.
Yeah, yeah, it's super interesting, isn't it? Because I think that's a big hang up a lot of people have, that it feels like this monumental shift in their habits, their daily living, how they look after their family. People worry about bills as well. Like, it's a concern that it might be expensive, even if you could argue that it's going to be cheaper or whatever it might be. So it's a really, really strong point. And do you find that opens the doors that people can find that, let's say, an easier gateway to get into this movement and to participate?
Yeah, I think so. So we built this tool called that we call the compassion calculator. And what this does is it shows people how much money you would need to donate to effectively kind of offset
Mhm.
your animal eating. So it's like you think carbon offsetter, but for your diet and for its impact on animal welfare. And what we found is that people really love this idea because they might have kind of in the back of their mind, or maybe in the front of their mind, sort of concerns about the way that we produce food and its impact on the environment, its impact on animals. But they don't feel like there's a good option out there for them to impact this. And we say, look, whatever your life choices, whatever your diet choices, however you kind of manage that for yourself, um, this is something you can do. We can show you exactly how much you need to do. And it's a really quite small amount. So for the average omnivore in the West, that $23 a month is enough to kind of completely zero out your impact on animals. So it's really, like, for a lot of people, a very manageable amount of money.
Yeah.
Um, and that just, I think, allows people, it kind of lifts a bit of a weight off people's shoulders and allows you to kind of, I think, then start to engage with this issue without maybe feeling kind of guilty or hypocritical or something like that. Because you're doing something. You're making you're doing your bit. And so you can just sort of
100%.
like engage with the issue much more kind of without that sort of emotional baggage, I guess.
Absolutely. When I was doing a bit of research about what you guys are doing at FarmKind, I really liked your approach to starting conversations with people, your social media, where it's about like showing the animals in a positive way, and maybe a little bit sensitive to showing the negative things that are happening. So like not beating people up, but like opening the door to start a conversation. I'm like, that's very refreshing for me, because one of the things I'm concerned about is that we want to have more compassion towards animals, towards all living things, but simultaneously being really mean to people who are struggling to get there. And that seems like a bit of a conflict. It's like, I'm super compassionate to the animals, but really mean to people who are struggling to change their diet, or struggling to get into the movement, or struggling to just change behaviors, which is, as we know, super difficult to do. Um, uh,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I like to, I say that people are animals too. We've got to we've got to be kind to all animals. Then that includes being kind to human animals too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I wonder, like, when you were thinking, or when you're going to the ambitious impact organization, the it's like an incubator for charities or for people who are trying to start a charitable movement. Why did you want to start your own charity as opposed to, let's say, teaming up with someone who's already established?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, and I think for people who are interested in kind of having, turning their career to something that's kind of having a positive impact on the world, I think this is something that you really want to think about because
Mm.
arguably being a kind of early employee in like in a growing new charity that's doing really good work is probably just as impactful and going to do just as much good as starting one. In fact, potentially more, because when you're starting a brand new organization, there's a lot of risk that it's not going to work, that like it might just not be as good an idea as you thought it was going to be, this kind of thing. Whereas if you kind of going into something with a little bit of a track record, you have a lot more certainty that like whatever it is they're doing, whether it's some sort of new global health intervention or something in the animal space, is actually going to be impactful and is going to do good. So I think the reasons to start a organization yourself, and the reasons that I kind of thought about this was, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I applied for the program not thinking I would get in, but because I wanted to basically use it to sort of gauge how viable this kind of career path would be for me. So I thought, oh, if I get a long way in the process, then I can think like, yeah, maybe this is something to pursue. And if I get kind of booted out straight away, then I'll be like, okay, maybe this isn't for me. So that was a large part of it. But I think I've always been interested in kind of trying to start things. I really want to push myself and see how far I can go and take on new challenges. And the kind of life of a charity founder is definitely one of like constantly pushing yourself, doing new things. You have to kind of do everything yourself. And so you're having to bring on a huge number of new skills and explore things. You throw yourself into things you've never done before. And so that was that kind of self-starting and just sort of jack of all trades aspect of the work.
That appealed to you. That appealed to you to take on every single part of the organization and try run it yourself. I think there's also a great value to being able to have a small, nimble organization that can make lots of decisions quickly. And that's something that struck me when I was on your website, is you're saying like, we're able to try lots of different things, to go to lots of different people, to try different approaches. Right? You have less hierarchy, you have less layers, you have less bureaucracy, you have less slowness in decision making. That's what makes small organizations nimble. Like if you're a 2-person team or your 2-person team, is that fair? Is that right? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So we have a small team of volunteers as well, but we're 2 members of.
But that must be refreshing. That must be super helpful to be so nimble that you can make decisions quickly. You can try lots of different things. You can try different approaches. Is that one of your core approaches?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we are very much into trying to not try and prove that we're right, but just find the right answer. And so we spend a lot of time trying to kind of analyze the work that we're doing and the kind of the kind of tactics and strategies that we're approaching, see what works and see what's not working, and pivot quickly towards the things that are working and test things out.
I'd love to know what works really well and what have you found doesn't work so well.
Yeah, so what's working well, I think as I mentioned before, the compassion calculator, this like offset calculator, that really, so we built that originally as kind of we thought, oh, this is kind of cool. We kind of built it on, it was a bit of a side project that we built initially. We thought maybe we could get a bit of attention and this could be fun and show people how much like the impact that donations can have. And it really kind of caught people's imagination. People really liked it. We got some really good feedback on it quite early on. So that was something that worked really well. And we sort of, that's become much more of a core part of what we do and kind of how we kind of talk about ourselves. What didn't work so well, so our initial idea was we were really excited by some research that was being done by an organization called Giving Multiplier. So this is a number of Harvard psychologists who were looking at like, how do you get people to like want to donate to some of the charities that are like saving lives the most? How do you find charities that what they call super effective charities? And they had this really interesting idea that works really, really well for them, which is basically you ask people to kind of pick like a favorite charity and pick one of the sort of super effective charities that they work with experts to identify. And then you sort of split your donation between the two. So you're donating to both charities. It's not like an either or thing. You donate to your favorite thing and you donate to this one, and they give you a boost on both of these donations. And what they found in some randomized control trials, so scientific tests, is that this kind of approach gets people to donate far more to the really effective charities, and so their donations go a lot further, and they also feel better about their donations than like either donating to one or the other of these charities. So it was really exciting. They've raised millions of dollars. They've done really well, like bringing this out into the wild, into the real world. And so we were really interested in trying this out for like the animal space, because it's like it's we like that it's like research backed, and it was kind of cool, and no one else was doing it. So that's what we launched with. That was sort of the core kind of concept and idea. And it's still a thing that we have on our website, and people can use it if they think that sounds cool and they'd like to do that with animal charities, they can do that. But what we found is, for us in the wild, in the sort of real world, it's quite complicated to explain to people. You've got to kind of like go, okay, so I'm going to tell you why you should donate to factory farm animal charities, and then I'm going to tell you this special way of donating. And for a lot of people, I think they just want to donate. They just want to give, they're like, I care about this issue. I just want to give some money. I don't want to have to jump through these kind of like hoops. So that didn't work as well as we had hoped, or at least hasn't so far.
I wonder why. Like I immediately like it, and I feel like I get it. It's like your emotional decision is to give money to the puppies, but the logical decision is to give money to the 100 pigs.
Yeah, exactly.
The emotion one typically feels better, but we know the logical one is right. And I don't know. I think probably we're mostly driven by the emotional choices. Is that your experience?
Yes. So I think actually I was reading some really interesting research on this the other day, which is actually kind of fascinating and suggests why this wouldn't work as well. So in this paper, it was actually some of the same researchers as did the Giving Multiplier. They were looking at like how much people value humans versus animals, and how much people value different animals. So maybe it was actually a dog and a pig. So exactly like you mentioned. And when they get people to sort of think about this analytically and to try and be like really logical and think about it, and when they get asked people to like actually just think emotionally, and what they found was that if you get people to think emotionally, they actually are more like, they actually think that humans and animals are more similar. But if you get them to think emotionally, they kind of really like dogs and they're not so keen on pigs. And then if you get people to think logically, it kind of goes the other way around. So like most people have this intuition that human lives matter a lot more than animal lives, but they also think logically that there's no good reason to care a lot more about a dog than about a pig. So this is really fascinating, and not necessarily what I would have guessed was the case, and certainly not what, if you think about like what philosophers argue, they tend to argue that we're more morally similar to animals and than we might think. But I think basically, when it comes to asking people to donate to, maybe to donate less to the to like an animal shelter and more to more money to factory farming and things like this, which is kind of one of the areas that we really focus on, like people who already like care about animals, already think about donating to animals. Actually, it is quite a logical argument you want to make for people. It's to say, look, actually, 97% of the donations that currently go towards animals go to dogs and cats and animals living in shelters. There is not really much difference between these animals. Certainly, pigs are about as intelligent emotionally as dogs, and cognitively. They can form relationships with each other, with humans. They play, they're inquisitive. They have all these similar traits. They are, basically the difference between a dog and a pig is that one of them lives in your house and you know them, you gave them a name, and the other one lives on a factory farm, right? And that is kind of the difference. And people logically do get this, and it does, and this seems to be the thing that changes people's minds.
Yeah, that's super interesting, isn't it? That little bit of extra awareness makes a big difference. Whenever I have conversations with people, I always feel like they know where the conversation's going. They get it. It's, and then it becomes sensitive, or it becomes like uncomfortable or something like that. I don't want to put people in that position, but if I feel like they know, and once the awareness is brought there, but it's still like, then you're making them feel bad, and it's like, well, what am I going to do at the end of the day? And then it gets really difficult for them to get over that hurdle. So I just wonder, like, I see this YouTuber Earthling Ed, and he's like super passionate about what he does, but he beats people up all the time, right? And he makes them feel super bad for what they're doing. And I don't know the impact of that. I don't know how effective that is when someone goes, yeah, now I feel like shit. Oh, maybe I'll change and I'll do what you're suggesting. I'm not sure if it works that way. What I'm really interested in is like when you're making changes? Like, what really impacted you? What did you find was really helpful? Was it, let's say, did you find like there were certain meals that you thought were going to be easier and that helped you change your diet a little bit? Or was it once you realized that you could donate that really made the shift easier for you? Like, what really worked in terms of efficacy in your own life?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So for me, I remember really clearly when I sort of started going down the journey of actually changing kind of my own behaviors. And it was through talking to my now wife, partner at the time. And we were on a tube train in London, and there was like a poster up on the. They have lots of like adverts on the tube, and there was one. It was about kind of it was about going vegan or something like this. And she started talking to me about it, and I felt myself get immediately extremely defensive. And I was like, "Well, the way to solve this is really like clearly factory farming is bad, but we need like government intervention. We need some better regulations. Like this is the solution." Um, and I think she said to me something like, "Yeah, but you're not make those regulations happen, are you?" And I was like, "No." But I thought about it later, and I thought, well, why? Because I realized that I got um, frustrated and defensive very quickly, like more quickly than really this conversation merited. Like that wouldn't be how I would have preferred to show up to that conversation. And that sort of started me thinking, oh, well, why was that? Like, why did I feel this way? And I basically came to the conclusion that like it was because she was right, and that I didn't really want that to be the case. And that much as like I honest, like it is true that like ultimately the answer to this I think will come from changes in regulations and changes in like at the broader societal level. But I can't do anything about that. There are things though that I can do. So
Mm.
for me, I didn't know about donate. I didn't know about donating as like an option at the time. So for me at the time, I felt that the only option was to kind of change my diet. And so I kind of that started a process of like being vegetarian on and off a bit and stuff like this. And like eventually, as I learned more, like going to so I now am completely vegan, but that was a process of kind of learning and sort of working on that over a number of years.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So just being confronted with some of those facts and being challenged by the loved one in your life, that really made the big shift, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was like, yeah, I think it's having somebody that you know and that you value their opinion, like
Mm.
makes a really big difference, right? Like being kind of preached to by some person on the internet is one thing. Having somebody who still loves you, still isn't judging you for your actions, but just has a different opinion
Mm.
and a different kind of view, I think is a much easier way to start like opening yourself up to these questions and thinking about them because you're not feeling, I think crucially, not feeling judged and not
Yeah.
feeling like they think you're a less good person because of this. And I think that's a really key part.
Yeah, yeah. What about the focus on reducing demand, right? So much is about giving to charity, which is fantastic. But if we look at like how we had a change in smoking, and I know that was one of the things you talked about on your channels. What changed smoking in our culture? Well, increased taxation to increase the prices, social pressure because it became less cool, right? Because now and then like smoking indoors became prohibited. So like those kind of two or three things really made it taboo in our culture to be smoking. Um, what do you think are the sort of impacts we could do with factory farming that would have those same sort of changes?
Yeah, I think that's a really good, interesting analogy. So I think what happens with a lot of these kind of big changes, because if you think about, I mean, we just sort of think about the change in smoking. There was a time where people literally thought smoking was good for you. And like
Mm,
this, it was a completely ubiquitous. The idea that we would have a society now where, like, really, honestly, like, if you leave aside vapes, like, very few people smoke these days. And that would be wild to people, living in the sort of 60s or 50s or whatever,
right.
right?
And then if you smoke indoors beside somebody, it's like, what are you're
Yeah,
crazy. What are you doing? Like, this is totally inappropriate. It's rude. It's disrespectful. And somebody's probably going to call you out, right? Whereas
yeah,
most of the time, if somebody's like being a bit loud, we might put up with them. But if they're smoking, it's like, that's totally unacceptable. It's like we've changed that, like from you shouldn't to you absolutely must not.
yeah, exactly. And I think the way that this occurs is it's this combination of people in people changing their attitudes, and then the law changing alongside those. And
Mm.
sometimes the law and regulations runs a little bit ahead of people, and sometimes people run a little bit ahead of the regulations and things. And I think so. You kind of need both. You need people to be wanting the change, for
Mm.
politicians to feel empowered to make changes, and you need um, and you need the sometimes the regulations actually to like kind of show people
Mm.
a new path. So in the space of factory farming, I think a really good example of how this is going on at the moment is cage free. So there are organizations like the Humane League who've been working on campaigns to persuade big companies like Walmart and Burger King and Dunkin' Donuts and these kind of companies to only buy eggs from hens that are not kept in battery cages, in cages at all. And having a hen not in a cage is a huge difference to their quality of life. So they're able to stretch their wings, they're able to move around, they are able to maybe even do things like dust bathing, which is like a core kind of
Mm.
one of those really natural behaviors for chickens. When they're kept in cages, they're kept in a space about the size of a normal size piece of paper, so like an A4 piece of paper,
Does that mean they
for
can
their
walk?
entire life.
But does that mean
So
they
they
can
can't.
walk, or are
No,
they still
not
kind of
really.
like turning in circles?
Yeah, so they basically are not walking. They're certainly not opening their wings, and they are sometimes, they're standing on metal grill, like right because
Mm.
it's a wire
Right.
cage.
Cuts their feet.
Sometimes, yeah, and this is like their entire life. They're not. It's not like they're kept there for some of the day and then let out for a bit of exercise. Like that is where they live. So getting them out of these cages is like night and day quality of life difference, right? And these kind of campaigns where you ask the public to say, look, no, I don't want my eggs to come from hens that have lived in these conditions. I want the food that I buy to be produced in a more humane, less cruel way. And what they've seen is these companies just sort of fold to this public pressure. They are very often very happy to make these changes, or at least feel that they need to make these changes. And these campaigns have produced incredible differences. So since organizations like the Humane League started these campaigns around about 15 years ago in the US, they've gone from about 4% of the chickens, the egg-laying chickens in the US being cage-free to now about 40%, which is
Wow.
a huge difference. Yeah. And in the UK, where I'm based, it's gone from about 50% in the last sort of 8 years, because THL now works in the UK as well, from about 50% to about 75% cage free. So really massive differences. It costs, roughly speaking, about 85 cents per chicken to get them to become cage free. So you can make a huge amount of difference to these animals for really tiny amounts of money, and it's been really effective in actually like shifting companies. And as companies shift, as they become more accepting of these kind of different ways, that then opens up the space for regulations that can bring that kind of the last few intractable percent of organizations on as well. And so you can have these kind of like snowballing effects that start with the public saying like, no, I want something better. I want animals to be treated better, and kind of then spreads out to companies and to regulations and things like this that then creates the real lasting and significant change.
That's sensational, right? That they're phenomenal percentage or step change increases in the welfare of the chickens over their very short lifespans, right?
Yeah.
But it's a great change. But it is interesting how the behavior of the public actually demanding better conditions leads so it like follows the money, right? Because when the public ask, the companies respond, and then eventually the politicians are going to respond to both of those parties as well. I'm interested in like I'm sure you get asked this all the time. I still have to ask it when people make the donations. Everyone always wonders where's my money go. You guys disperse the money to a couple of different organizations. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So the first thing to say is all the donations that people make via our platform, we don't keep any of that money at all. So we are fully funded by grant making organizations and kind of people who are sort of have a bit more money and really are passionate about this issue
Philanthropists and so on.
yeah, exactly, philanthropists. So any money donated through us, we keep not a single cent of it. It all goes straight through. We basically work with experts in the kind of field of like working out what are great charities in for animals, to identify charities that we think are particularly good and have the kinds of impacts that the Humane League that I mentioned before have. And we basically we currently recommend 6 charities. They are or the Humane League, an organization called Synergie Animal that does a very similar thing to the Humane League, but in kind of the global south, where there's where regulations and animal protections are even worse than they are in the West, and also where kind of meat buying is growing fastest. We also work with some organizations doing similar, doing kind of helping to create the new future of food. So things like plant-based meats and cultivated meats and these kinds of ways we can actually structurally move away from factory farming and have a healthy, sustainable food system that doesn't involve this at all. And then also some organizations working for some of the most kind of farmed animals out there, which are actually fish and crustaceans. So we have a kind of wide range of charities in these 6. They're all, as I say, expert vetted. And when you donate through us, you can choose one of these charities to donate to, or you can donate to. We have a kind of fund where we just disperse the money to all 6 charities. So you can, with one click, you can just like help them all if you don't want to kind of make a pick for yourself.
If the choices are too hard, right? You love them all equally. You love them all equally.
Yeah, exactly. Just give to them all. Yeah.
Give to them all. Yeah, I like it. When you're trying to get donations, is your charity predominantly focused on large philanthropists, strategic partners like companies, let's say consulting companies who have tons of cash, and maybe they want to do it as part of their employee assistance program, or their corporate social responsibility, or is it more individuals on the street, private donors?
Yeah. So we
or
focus on. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't turn anyone down, but we're primarily focused on kind of ordinary people. So our donors donate anything from kind of about $10 to all the way up to some people donate $1,000 at a time through us. And so that's kind of the space that we primarily work in. The reason is because there are a number of organizations out there who are working with kind of like higher sort of high net worth philanthropists and things like that, and doing some great work. Farm Animal Funders is an example of an organization doing that work. We felt that there was actually more of a gap in the market, as it were, for kind of talking to people who are kind of ordinary, smaller donors. Because as we kind of going back to what we said before, we felt that like a lot of the language that organizations were kind of giving to these people was much more kind of like, hitting them over the head with like very distressing images and kind of maybe trying to shame them a little bit and this kind of stuff. And we felt that wasn't maybe not very helpful. And we didn't see somebody who was trying to talk to people in a much more positive way about like, these animals are really great. And actually we can do a lot to make their lives a lot better.
I wonder, has anyone studied the effectiveness on both of those approaches, like the carrot versus the stick, in terms of getting people to contribute or make positive lifestyle changes?
So I'm not aware of like a systematic study of this. If there is one, I'd love to see it. But we essentially we intend to test this. Like this is one of the things we want to test, because we do believe that that I'm not saying that kind of approach doesn't work at all. Like I think it it clearly does for some people, but there are a lot of people out there who I think are just switched off by this approach, and it's not, it's repelling them, not bringing them in. And so we're trying to speak to those people.
Yeah, that's super. I remember it was actually, in my case, it was the stick. One of my friends recommended that I watch this documentary called Earthlings. I'm sure you've come across it. I got on a bus for 3 or 4 hours. I said, I'm going to watch this documentary. And for me, I felt once I've seen something, I cannot unsee it. Once I've heard it, cannot unhear it. And I would have to be lying to myself quite a bit to pretend I hadn't started this documentary and I just unfinished it, because I didn't want to feel those uncomfortable feelings about what I was seeing or what I was hearing. And so, for me, when I got off the bus, I was immediately a vegetarian. So it was really like it was like a 90-minute stick that I was getting beaten with. But after that, I found speaking with, and I'm interested in your experience of speaking with friends, because obviously you tell them, hey, I've started this charity. This is what I do now. And obviously they know you're very passionate about it. So I wonder how those conversations go. But like when I'm speaking with my friends and family, I like to introduce them to vegan food. So I like to, oh, let's go to this restaurant. Let's try this cake, introduce them to vegan food and have them, I suppose, open up those options for like, oh, I didn't know this is delicious, this is possible, this is affordable. Um, and then like if they're going to have a choice A or choice B, hopefully they choose the vegan choice. So I wonder in your case where you tell your family and friends, this is my new career path. They obviously know you're passionate about it. You're dedicating your career to it. How do those conversations go? Are they easy? Are they difficult? Or is there a bit of
Yeah.
tension?
Yeah. So I think, so yeah, I guess like firstly, I mean, I anecdotally at least, it seems like documentaries are a really powerful way that like a lot of people get into this issue for sure. And I can see why, because they are, they're hard to watch. I mean, I tend to take the same these days. I certainly try and take the same approach you do. I like to. I live in London, where there are amazing vegan restaurants like all over the city, for kind of any kind of food you could like to eat. And so that is like definitely a great tool for kind of like opening
Mm,
people up to vegan options. Um, I also like to use vegan cheese because vegan cheese has like historically been particularly terrible, I think.
mm.
And yet there are some now surprisingly good options. Out there. So Cathedral City, their vegan cheese is
It's
really, really quite good.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And so these same things where you can kind of surprise people with like, oh, I didn't know vegan food could be this good. I've actually managed to convert my parents to predominantly drinking oat milk now because they agree with me that it's actually tastes better. So I think that helps. But I did try the sort of more like, did you know I'm going to tell you what's going on the thing when I kind of first went vegan. I think a lot of people do, right? Because you've just been opened up to this and your kind of
Mm,
like view about the world and about what's going on has radically changed. And suddenly there's this thing that's really important to you. And you want the people that you care about to also think that this thing is important because it matters to you, right? And so I think
yeah.
it's entirely natural to kind of want to tell people and want to kind of, preach as it were. I just think ultimately most of us who do that realize eventually that it's just not working.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
think
it's
you want to
not
share because you care, right? Like it's like when you come across
yeah,
Netflix, you're like, "Oh my God, you got to see this app. You can watch
yeah.
anything you want whenever you want." Like you want to share something that has made your life better, or something that you believe in, or if you have that like a similar value to your friends and family. So I think that makes lots of sense. Can I ask on a day-to-day basis, like imagine someone is thinking of changing their career. Like tons of people come to me and they say, "I want to do something meaningful. I want to do something impactful. I want to help, right?
Mm,
Others, right?
yeah.
Others could be human animals or non-human animals, but and they're thinking, but I don't know if I have the skills. I don't know what the day-to-day work is like. I don't know if I'm going to be able. All these concerns, let's call them. Um, and so they wonder about their transferable skills.
Mm.
You've been a lawyer before, you've studied music before. So they wonder like, am I going to be able to do it? What sort of skills do I need? So what sort of words of advice or encouragement or reassurance, Tom, maybe is the best word that you would have for them?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to say is I think the if you want to do good with your life, like the two biggest things you have, kind of the two biggest levers you have are your money, and then secondly your time, right? And so I think if you want to like if you're excited about the idea of kind of changing your career to do good, I fully endorse that. I think that's like one of the best things you can do to like make an impact, positive impact on the world with your life. Um, and I think people would be surprised at just how much they can do. The thing is that most people in life, the things that they really want is like make a lot of money or like have a really prestigious job or something like this, right? And so there aren't actually that many people who are really ambitious to do good. And so simply by having that ambition, you're like that on itself is really valuable. And the chances that you can find something that's good for your skills is just like quite high because there just aren't enough people who want to do this with their lives. And so having that dedication and ambition alone is extremely valuable.
So there's lots
I
more spaces open for people to get into this type of field?
Yeah, I think so. So, obviously, as I say, the animal space particularly, but this is the case in many places, is like quite funding constrained. So sometimes it can be,
Yep.
you might find it a little bit difficult to find jobs in your area or something like this. But I think that it is worth pursuing because the reality is that it's also talent constrained. There is also not enough people. And so the chances of finding something where you can do a really good job and be good enough to do that job is like quite high. And I think people would be surprised at how high that opportunity is, particularly in the animal space. Global health and development can be a little bit trickier because sometimes you need more qualifications for some of those jobs, and like it can be a bit more specialist. But the animal space is a really new, it's a relatively young kind of movement. It's quite scrappy. It's quite kind of it's a real family, and so actually like you don't it's not like you need to have gone and studied animal welfare at university or anything to get involved in this. You can come from all kinds of different backgrounds, and people do come from like myself, from sort of the law, from kind of grassroots campaigning, from just having sort of my co-founder worked at Uber before, and also for consultancy. So people coming from all over the place. There is a really good organization called Animal Advocacy Careers that help people kind of specifically if they want to kind of dedicate their career to animals, and that's a really good organization to kind of find out what the opportunities are out there. But I would certainly say, yeah, I wouldn't. If you think that you don't have the right qualifications, that's almost certainly not true. Like,
Yeah.
definitely,
There's
not let
something
that.
you can do, and there's skills you can gain, and there's knowledge you can gain. And
Yeah,
I think animal advocacy careers have some career supports. They have like career consultations or career
yeah.
advice that you can go to, and they'll support you through that transition.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they have a sort of self-study course that I did, and I thought was a really good kind of primer for understanding like what's out there, what are the options, that sort of thing, and getting you thinking about what you could do. And then they also do kind of career coaching stuff as well.
Okay, great. That's great. So, just before we wrap up, there's one thing I want to ask you, which is about the future. Where you see your future with FarmKind going, like, whether it's scaling the amount of donations you get, growing your social media and your online channel presence, or getting big strategic donors. What are your plans and hopes for the future?
Yeah, so our big kind of thing is trying to kind of get the word out there and increase the size of our community. So we have helped, or donors donating through FarmKind have helped over 3 million animals so far.
Oh
We
well,
launched earlier this year.
that's
Um,
sensational. Well done.
yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, so we're really really pleased. I mean, really, I should be thanking our donors, right? Because it's them who've done this.
It's team
But
effort.
yeah, exactly. And so that's really exciting. So what we want to do is just increase that impact. So over the next kind of year, we'll be really kind of trying to increase the amount of kind of awareness raising we're doing, going out and talking to people, trying to kind of go on podcasts like this and talk to people about this and kind of get people to think about these issues, particularly as I say, this idea that you don't need to make diet changes, you don't need to kind of radically change your life to have a really big impact on this issue. Something just as simple as making a one-off donation or setting up like a recurring, $10-20 a month kind of thing can really make a surprisingly big difference. And so that's kind of our main focus now, is just to kind of grow from from this kind of starting point we have now to be a much bigger community that can help 10 billion,
That's
10 million animals, 50 million animals, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, and so on. That's fantastic. So already 3 million animals helped just in a couple of months, and tons of opportunities on the horizon. Your social media channels are growing, I can see, very quickly. So well done on that as well. And look, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us about something you're obviously very passionate about. You're making a phenomenal impact on the lives of animals who you'll never meet, but they'll appreciate it in their own way.
Thank you. This has been really fun. It's been a great conversation.
So yeah, thanks so much. I'm going to put the links to those various to your website and animal advocacy career, so people can find them there, and to your social channels so they can follow you. So thanks again, Tom. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much.